Inside the heat-hazed Lego's hangar, a giant silver jet engine rested on a wheeled stand like a sleeping animal, and frustration pressed against the walls while the clock's too loud tick carved seconds into nerves. Engineers in oil-marked coveralls circled the nacelle. A red tool cart gaped open, drawers half-pulled like tongues. Andrew Jacobs, in a Navy suit, checked his watch again, his itinerary held hostage by a machine that refused obedience. Then a clear voice slid through the heat. "If you permit, I will fix it." Heads turned to the open door. A young woman stood there in a tattered gown, hair wind-tossed, fingers stained with the kind of grease that never scrubs entirely clean. She looked thin, the way hunger writes itself into collarbones, yet her eyes were bright and steady, fixed on the engine as if greeting an old friend. Laughter tried to puncture the silence. Sam, the veteran head of maintenance, half smiled, half surrendered to exhaustion. "We've been at this 6 hours. What could you possibly add?" A junior engineer muttered, "Who let her in?" and waved for security. Andrew lifted one hand, voice even. "Let the young lady speak." The guards paused. The woman stepped forward, light folding around her like a dare. She did not posture. She asked for gloves. She slid them on, hands trembling for a breath, then steady, and crossed to the intake. Her fingers grazed the lip, trailed the sensor harness, and came to rest at a small panel near the compressor case. She tapped it, leaning closer as if the alloy could whisper its grievances. "Do you even know what you're touching?" the young engineer asked, eager to defend his pride. She didn't answer him. She took a flashlight and a small mirror, angled the glass, and peered into darkness brightened to truth. "There," she said, almost to herself. "The V-band clamp is seated on the wrong groove, tight but misaligned, so under load it leaks and sings." Her gloved finger traced lead. "And this sensor wire's insulation is cracked. It rubs here. When heat climbs, the data lies, and the core feels rough." Sam blinked, embarrassment and admiration colliding. "How did we miss that?" "Because the faults disguise each other," she said. "Sound blames the leak. Numbers blame the core. You listened to one voice at a time." Andrew weighed risk against a rare, lucid certainty. "Can you fix it?" She met his eyes, then looked at the neat chaos of the cart. "If you permit." "Do it," he said, as if signing a contract with resolve. Air changed. Skepticism thinned to watchfulness. She loosened the clamp with measured turns, reseated it to the proper groove, and torqued until a crisp click answered spec. She trimmed the abraded insulation, wrapped fresh protection, slid heat shrink, sleeved the run, and tied it clear of the chafing bracket. Wipe, check, recheck. No flourish, only craft. Someone whispered, "Time?" A tech answered, 17 minutes. She set the gloves on the cart, palms together like a quiet amen. "We'll test," Sam said, voice no longer skeptical but careful, like a man approaching a skittish truth. The stand rolled. Beacons spun red across the polished wing. Outside, afternoon sun gilded the apron. Inside, breath thinned. Andrew took the starter, paused, and glanced at the woman who had asked only for permission and a pair of gloves. "Everyone clear?" Sam called. Cones were checked. Lines lay straight. Andrew pressed. A low whine gathered, rose into a smooth rush. Then an alarm chirped and a lone red light glared. The sound wavered. Instant lunged toward shutdown. She raised her hand. "Don't. Listen. The loop is relearning after bad data. Hold steady." Authority lived in the calm of her tone. Numbers fluttered, then settled. The red blinked twice, turned green, and stayed. Gasps rippled. A wrench clanged to the floor. The engine purred into velvet thunder, erasing 6 hours of failure in under 20 minutes. Andrew's disbelief softened to wonder. He faced her, voice low, carried by echoed aluminum. "Your name." She swallowed, then stood straighter. "Olivia Williams." Recognition widened Sam's eyes, the prodigy from Nigeria Aerospace University who had vanished without a trace. She did not offer tragedy yet. The machine's proof was enough. Andrew's gaze held hers. something long dormant, waking. In the steady green, a second chance found its pilot light.
The test became ceremony, and the hanger moved as if cued by an unseen stage manager. Pins pulled, tow bar latched, cones marched into formation, and the polished floor surrendered the engine stand to the burnish of afternoon. Andrew kept his hand on the starter panel a second longer than needed, as though willing fortune not to drift, then stepped back, while Sam and two leads ran their post-repair checklist with a diligence usually reserved for inspectors and accidents. Numbers that had bullied them all morning now behaved like domesticated animals, gentle in their ranges, steady in their climb. The red lamp, shamed by new truth, stayed dark. One by one, the crew's faces unclenched. Sam finally exhaled the kind of breath that makes a man older or younger by a year, then turned to Olivia with a nod that meant more than an apology. Andrew, reading the room the way he reads balance sheets, recognized the hinge in a life and decided to swing it open. "You're not walking back to the fence," he said, the words quiet and irreversible. "You're coming with me." London waited on contracts, but what mattered first was a seat. 15 minutes later, security badges materialized, a temporary pass was printed, and the Challenger stairs shrugged their silver shoulders to receive two people who had just renegotiated fate. Inside the cabin, cream leather bent light into gentleness. Polished tables reflected a woman who could not yet bear to look at herself. Olivia chose the window and folded inward, elbows tight as if to make less trouble for expensive air. "Where did you train?" he asked, and listened as she named Nigeria Aerospace University, distinction, faculty who taught her to trust harmonics before hype. He pressed a button and a hostess arrived with water, warm towels, and a garment bag the color of champagne. "You will not be measured by rags," he said, eyes kind, tone matter-of-fact. In the lavatory mirror, Olivia met the ghost of herself and began, with soap and breath, to invite the living version back. She untangled wind-snarled hair, tied it into a calm bun, and stepped into a simple gold gown that fit as if it had been waiting for the moment her courage returned. When she emerged, Andrew stood reflexively, startled not by glamour, but by rightness, like a correct torque reading finally clicking home. He reached into a side compartment and placed a velvet box on the table. Inside lay a thin bracelet, gold warmed by memory, initials A.J. engraved like a signature on dawn. "My late wife wore this when she was certain someone deserved a hand up," he said. "I have not opened this box in a long time." Olivia shook her head, the instinct to refuse flaring, but he raised a palm. "This is not charity. It is a receipt, proof that I believe what I saw." She closed the lid softly, as if agreeing to sign later. During climb-out, Lagos dwindled to bright threads, and the ocean drew a line between what had happened and what could. Turbines settled into their velvet thunder. The cabin hum made a cradle for talk. Andrew described the meeting ahead, executives who respect evidence, skeptics who respect outcomes, a room that listens poorly until something undeniable speaks. You will not need to impress them. You will only need to tell the truth cleanly. Olivia listened to the engines and found herself listening to her own pulse keeping time with them. Choice arrived without ceremony, but with weight. Disappear again and protect the ache, or step forward and risk the little hope she had rebuilt. She looked out at the faint curvature where sky begins to admit its size, and thought of fences, of the red lamp turning green, of gloved hands finding the right groove in the dark. "I will step into it," she said, voice small and decisive. Andrew nodded, relief showing like sunlight on instruments after cloud. Tomorrow would be tests and tempered respect and maybe a war with doubt. But tonight the cabin gathered her like a promise. She leaned back, felt the machine thrumming patient strength beneath her feet, and for the first time in years, allowed sleep to find her before worry did. London's dawn washed the glass towers in pale orange as the Challenger kissed the runway. By the time a black car slid under the portico of J.J. Maintenance, Repair, and Overhaul International, Olivia's pulse had settled into turbine calm. Andrew walked half a step ahead, not to shield her, but to announce that rooms would open. The boardroom they entered was all angles and quiet light, a table long enough to sit doubt beside authority, screens idling with rotating engines and scrolling numbers. Executives arranged themselves like instruments in a cautious orchestra. A woman with silver hair wound into a precise bun, a sharp-eyed figure in a red blazer, and a thin man behind rimless glasses whose skepticism arrived before his greeting. "Mr. Jacobs," he said, tapping a pen once, "we waited 6 hours." Andrew's reply carried a practiced stillness. "I brought the engineer who returned my aircraft to service after others failed. I brought proof." I slid to Olivia, pausing at the simple gold gown that admitted nothing and apologized for nothing. The bun gestured to a chair. The red blazer did not smile. "Tell us," Thin Glasses said, "what you claim to have fixed." Olivia did not give a speech. She described what she heard and saw, a V-band clamp seated on the wrong groove, tight but misaligned. A chafed sensor lead whose insulation had failed, letting heat whisper lies into a control loop. She explained how two faults can masquerade as one another, how sound and data argue when both are partly wrong, how listening without ego is the fastest way to truth. Thin Glasses tried to turn confidence into coincidence. "Manuals can be memorized," he said with a careful shrug. The bun lifted a hand and pointed to the wall. "Run her a failure." A schematic bloomed across a screen. Numbers jittered. A red jewel flared beside a virtual core. Olivia stood where the light from the window struck the screen and watched harmonics dance against temperature and load. "This pattern doesn't fit physical stress," she said, almost to herself. "It's an echo, bad calibration or loose mounting on the sensor." She isolated the stream, corrected the offset in the sim, and watched the red disappear. She did not grin, she simply turned back to the table. "In the hangar, I would confirm the mount. Here, we agree the core is sound." Silence took a chair. The red blazer crossed one leg over the other, then nodded once despite herself. The bun's mouth shaped something like approval. Thin Glasses reached for another angle. "Brilliance does not run a branch," he said with a careful shrug. Andrew answered before she could. "Resilience does. Discipline does." She lost both parents in one day, vanished, and still carried her craft like a kept flame. That is leadership under load. The woman with the bun leaned forward. "If Lagos were yours," she asked Olivia, "what would change first?" Olivia did not talk about glory. She talked about procedures, torque spec discipline, chafe routing, apprentice rotations that pair theory with headset-on troubleshooting, pre-task briefs and post-task learning so mistakes buy tuition, not shame. She talked about data that stays honest and customers who stay because safety is audible. Not fanfare, she finished, cadence. The room absorbed it. Red Blazer uncrossed her arms, Thin Glasses stopped tapping his pen, the older woman set both palms on the table as if choosing the weight she would lift. "Very well," the bun said at last. "Welcome to J.J. Maintenance, Olivia Williams. From today, Lagos is yours." The words thudded through Olivia's chest like gear engaging. She bowed her head a fraction. Andrew did not clap. He only let out the breath he had been saving since he saw her in a doorway asking for gloves. Outside the boardroom, a corridor of glass showed London waking, buses threading wet streets, pigeons writing loose cursive across the sky. Andrew matched her pace. "There will be opposition," he said quietly. "Success invites it. Results silence it." Olivia nodded. She did not feel triumphant, she felt commissioned. In the lift, she looked at her hands and saw grease that wasn't there, a memory stain of work that had saved her from drowning.
At the lobby, a junior receptionist whispered, "Is that her?" Andrew opened the door as if concluding a ceremony. She stepped into the car feeling ready, steady, and finally, correctly named by purpose and light. The return to Lagos should have felt like triumph, but Olivia stepped from the car into a hangar bright as a showroom and dense with skepticism. Staff stood in crisp coveralls while whispers moved like crosswinds. Regional Director Adewale shook her hand with the stiffness of a ruler and said in a voice polished smooth that he preferred experience to spectacle. She answered with the only currency she trusted, procedures. She gathered the leads and walked them through torque-spec discipline, chafe routing, tag and bag, pre-task briefs, and post-task learning that turned mistakes into tuition. Sam stood at her shoulder like a lighthouse, translating confidence into rhythm the crew could follow. She posted a rotation pairing apprentices with headset-on diagnostics, opened a whiteboard for root cause maps, and pinned a sentence above dispatch. Listen first. By noon, she had audited tool control, tightened a ghost inventory, and scheduled a safety stand-down before any major job turned a wrench. Then, the test arrived. A high-profile client diverted with a Gulf Stream that stalled under load and coughed a warning no one wanted the press to hear. Adewale folded his arms and said the branch would remember this afternoon one way or another. Olivia paced the engine slow, fingers reading metal the way a pianist reads keys, letting sound and temperature tell their quarrel. Not fuel starvation, she said. The bleed valve sticks open at power, starving the compressor. She assigned tasks in clean, short sentences. Isolate, inspect, free, verify tolerance, reroute the sleeve, and prove. Sam set the rig, apprentices shadowed with wide eyes, and the client stood in a silence that felt like a held breath. Within the hour, the valve moved as designed, the sleeve sat clear of harm, the loop relearned truth, and the run-up sang steady. The client's shoulders lowered. A handshake sealed what applause could not. In the office, she wrote the job card as a record of choices, where they listened, where they measured, where they resisted the hurry that ruins craft. Momentum found the shop. Turn time shortened, quality escapes fell, a quiet pride replaced the brittleness that grows when people work afraid. Andrew arrived at dusk, jacket over his arm, and walked the floor. In a glassed-in office, he told Olivia the board wanted London's clarity in Lagos. Evidence before opinion, cadence before branding. She asked for training budget rather than banners. He signed and warned success makes noise in the wrong rooms. That night, she rearranged chairs and left a note for the early crew. Begin with beacons, end with questions. At dawn, the hangar held the soft industry of a place that had decided to work rather than perform. Apprentices logged lessons, leads corrected without humiliation. Adewale watched from the mezzanine, weighing outcomes. He sent a guarded email to headquarters and another to arrival, then descended to test her perimeter with compliments that bent like thin metal. Olivia answered the same way each time. Thank you. Here is the data. Here is the next improvement. Here is what I will sign my name to. Midweek, a journalist requested a portrait beside the woman the city now called the miracle engineer. Olivia declined and framed the team instead. Hands, tools, and a row of red tag bags. By Friday, the parts room looked like a diagram, and the break room fell quiet whenever a senior tech retold the red lamp turning green. Yet under the order, challenge hummed, a faint vibration you hear only when you stand still. She felt it in approvals that slowed, in a pause before a signature that should have flown, and in the echo of her own footsteps when everyone else had gone home. Still, she kept a cadence. Morning brief, mid-shift check, dusk review, a call to Andrew, a thank you text to the client who trusted her call. When the week closed, she stood under the gantry crane, palms on the cool rail, and let a ribbon of relief pass through. The hangar smelled of solvent and jet fuel and the sweetness of paint. She remembered fences and hunger and the feel of gloves snapping tight, and understood this was home, a clean floor, a true reading, a team that listens before it loosens. The week after the Gulf Stream win began with a different kind of noise, the bureaucratic kind, and Olivia met it at the mezzanine where Lagos looked orderly from above. Procurement had frozen 3 critical orders: bleed valves, V-band clamps,
sensor sleeves, each stamped budget variants in a system that had never flinched at wasting hours while counting pennies. Adewale greeted her with a politeness polished to a mirror and suggested postponing 2 overhauls until the narrative settles. She walked him through math instead of mood, rework rates already down, turn times already shorter, safety events at 0, and the month's revenue curve bending upward because the shop now learned in public and corrected in the open. Budgets measure belief, she said, and belief is earned by results. He nodded, non-committal, promised to review, and drifted away like fog that hadn't decided whether to lift or thicken. Olivia didn't chase him. She built around him. She opened her red-green rooms, 2 whiteboards at dispatch, green for proof done right, red for problems named without punishment. She invited the most prideful senior tech to pin the first red, thanked him for buying the class its tuition with his mistake, and watched the room's shoulders drop. She updated torque maps, rerouted chafe-prone runs, labeled drawers so clearly a stranger could grab the right tool in the dark, and ended each day with a 5-minute "What truth did the aircraft tell you?" huddle. Late that evening, with invoices spread like a paper runway, Jerry arrived and rolled sleeves and the kind of grin that asks permission to help. He drew a simple slope, training hours on one axis, revenue preserved by fewer reworks on the other, the line rising steady as dawn. "You didn't buy applause," he said softly. "You bought capacity." She surprised herself by laughing. They walked the quiet hangar, lights humming, floor shining, and he asked about the first thing she ever fixed. "A kerosene stove," she said. "It sang wrong. I listened until it sang right." He filed the story away the way good accountants file assets, not to hide them, but to remember their value. Tuesday brought rumor warfare. A burner account posted a grainy photo of Olivia in her old rags, captioned to sneer that she was a staged charity case foisted on a serious shop. Phones lit, a legacy client asked for clarity, and a junior mechanic looked shaken. Olivia gathered the team for 5 minutes. "We answer with process, not panic," she said, and published a 1-page "How We Earn Trust." Certifications listed, sign-off trees drawn, a sample job card redacted but complete, and 3 metrics plotted against last quarter: turn time, rework, customer returns. She messaged clients personally, attached the sheet, and invited audits any hour. The rumor withered in the light. By Wednesday, a surprise inspector arrived, clipboard crisp, eyes sharper. Someone had called him. Olivia met him with coffee, pulled up digital sign-offs, opened tool control logs, walked him through red-green boards, and asked him to pick 3 random jobs to trace from intake to release. He did. The dots connected. "You're new," he said, almost grudging. "We're listening," she answered. He snapped his pen closed and left a line on the form that mattered more than his signature: culture of procedure. That night, pressed against fatigue, doubt climbed the stairs like a trespasser. Olivia stayed late with the radio low and wrote 2 letters she didn't send, one to her mother, one to her father, telling them the hangar was starting to sound like a place where people would not be shamed for learning. Jerry found her there, palming 2 paper cups of tea, and sat without performing comfort. "You keep setting tables," he said, gesturing at the whiteboards, checklists, and tidy bins. "People will keep showing up to eat." She smiled, thin but real. Thursday, a vendor who had ignored them for months suddenly offered rush delivery at a premium. Olivia declined the markup, split the order, and called a smaller supplier she'd met as a student. The parts came on time and clean. When the premium vendor complained to headquarters, Andrew answered with a single sentence: "We purchased discipline, not favors." On Friday, rain braided the apron into mirrors, and a medevac jet diverted with a pressurization fault and a clock that could not be argued with. Olivia did not give speeches, she triaged. Outflow valve gasket, cracked. Swap, seal, integrity test, cabin hold, release. The aircraft lifted 27 minutes after wheels stop. A nurse pressed Olivia's grease-smudged hand in both of hers and said only, we had a baby on board. When the doors closed and the turbines dwindled, the hangar fell into a hush that felt like respect. Even the rumor accounts were quiet that night. Olivia logged the job, pinned a green card, and stood beneath the gantry crane letting relief wash through, not as triumph, but as confirmation. Inside that steady hum, she chose again the only strategy she trusted. Keep listening, keep teaching, keep the flame.
Night settled over the hangar in soft layers. Rain on tin, turbines winding down, the small, steady beep of chargers nursing tired batteries, when trouble tried to dress itself as coincidence. Olivia had finished the last red-green huddle and was halfway to the door when an apprentice hurried over, face drained. The Gulfstream we released pinged an intermittent fault. The client wanted a second look before sunrise. She called Sam, rolled her sleeves again, and walked back into the pool of light like a surgeon returning to the table. The data looked innocent, brief spikes in vibration with no heat to match, yet the harness routing on a bayonet connector felt wrong beneath her fingertips, a quarter turn shy of home, with the safety wire prettily looped and subtly misthreaded. Pretty is not the same as correct, she said, and photographed the detail before she fixed it. Push, seat, click, safety wire through the true path, witness mark aligned, log signed. She didn't announce sabotage, she recorded facts. At 2, a second coincidence appeared on a leer, chafe poised to begin where someone had reintroduced a sharp edge under a protective sleeve. Again, she corrected and wrote the story the metal was telling. Security radioed that cameras along the east wall had browned out in 3 neat bursts between midnight and 2. Olivia kept her voice even. Pull power and badge logs, correlate dips to doors. Then she gathered the night team in a semicircle that smelled of solvent and rain. No witch hunts, she said. We name problems, not people. We pair up in critical bays. We write what we do and why. We do not blink. Fatigue bowed heads, then lifted. Work resumed with the calm that follows a chosen rule. At 4, a medevac call pre-alerted them. Possible pressurization drama inbound, weather closing. The Dassault arrived shivering on jacks, a baby's cry carrying thinly through the fuselage on the low taxi hum. Olivia triaged without speeches. Outflow valve gasket cracked. Swap, seal, verify integrity, hold cabin, release once numbers sing. The fix took minutes measured like miles. The aircraft lifted 27 minutes after wheels stop. The nurse squeezed Olivia's grease-smudged hand in both of hers and said only, "We had a baby on board." The hangar exhaled. At 6, the apron went black. Cranes froze mid-breath. Ladders stood like arrested thoughts, and generators that should have coughed awake did not. Phone screens glowed like fireflies, while wind tapped the doors. Olivia walked toward the sound she trusted most, a silence where a solenoid should sing. The generator room smelled of dust and intention. A fuel solenoid sat pinned closed with a tooth-notched tie and a mean little wedge of plastic tucked under a bracket. She photographed the insult, cut the tie, flicked the priming sequence, and the big machine shouldered the dark aside. Lights rose across aluminum skin. The floor remembered its shine. She sent the photos to security with a short note. Treat this as engineering, not gossip. By 8, Jerry arrived with buns and black coffee and the kind of listening that reads between totals. He asked for timestamps, SKUs, which bays had cameras down, who held keys, whether procurement delays mapped to the same bad hours. "I'm not here to hunt people," he said. "I'm here to price behavior." It sounded like a torque spec for ethics and made her smile despite the hour. Together they sketched a plain trace: access, events, cost. He promised to make nonsense expensive.
By noon, security delivered a clip, a hooded figure loitering near the generator door, camera glare refusing a face but not a gate. Olivia didn't grandstand. She forwarded the package to Andrew and legal, then returned to work as if storms are weathered by keeping roofs intact. Andrew called with steel under warmth. Compliance reports to you and Sam for the quarter. Keep building. She did. She moved spares into a cage with 2-key access, rotated apprentices through lockout drills, and posted a rule above dispatch: listen first, sign last. At dusk, after the line quieted and the floor shone again, Jerry asked her up to the balcony where Legos glittered like a wet circuit board. Wind carried solder and rain. You turned engines into a choir and fear into a maintenance plan, he said, voice almost lost to traffic. There's one inspection I still need to file. He knelt, no crowd, no cameras, only sodium lamps and the patient hum, opened a velvet box and let a diamond catch a distant beacon. Olivia Williams, will you marry me? For a heartbeat, she saw fences and hunger and a red lamp turning green. Yes, she said, the word landing like gear on a good runway, firm, true, and exactly on centerline.
The cathedral rose like a ship of stone and glass above Lagos traffic, and inside it the morning light gathered into aisles of gold where flowers breathed quietly and a choir rehearsed harmonies that sounded like well-tuned engines at idle. Olivia arrived before the guests, not to pose, but to listen. She walked the length of the nave with her palms open, testing nerves the way she tests a panel, and found them steady. Jerry waited in a side chapel with Andrew, who pretended not to fidget with his cuff while coaching his breath into evenness like a pilot matching RPMs. Adewale arrived last, wearing approval like a suit he had not yet tailored. He nodded to Sam, then took a pew where he could see the altar and the exits at once. The processional began on a single violin, then widened into choir, and Olivia stepped into the aisle in a simple gown that refused to compete with the light. Andrew took her arm, proud and unsteady in a way that made him human. He whispered, "You turned a hangar into a school. Now let today be a quiet class on joy." And she squeezed his hand once, an answer that said she heard. At the altar, Jerry's smile flickered into something braver than charm, and the officiant welcomed the room with a line about work and love being the same discipline practiced in different languages. Vows followed, not ornate, but exact. Jerry promised steadiness, honest books, and a home where failures buy tuition and never shame. Olivia promised listening before loosening, mercy before pride, and to protect their family like a checklist protects a flight. Rings were exchanged, hands signed an invisible log the way they sign off a job card, and the choir rose into harmonies that made the chandeliers tremble. When the kiss landed, applause rolled through the cathedral like a clean takeoff run, and even Adewale stood to clap, his face learning how to agree with his heart. Inside the hall next door, reception tables were laid like maps of journeys, with centerpieces built from safety wire, tiny clamps, and white lilies that smelled faintly of new paint. Crew chiefs clapped in rough unison, and apprentices laughed, surprised by how ceremony could feel like belonging. Sam raised a toast that began as an apology and ended as a benediction. He said, "Leadership is the art of making it safe to tell the truth," and everyone lifted their glasses to that. Music found its tempo, and Jerry pulled Olivia onto the floor. Their first dance was less spectacle than relief, two people keeping rhythm after long seasons of turbulence. Adewale approached during the second song, carrying a small wrapped book. Inside was a leather-bound copy of the shop's procedures he had kept for years, its margins full of notes, and he asked her to write new notes beside his. She accepted, and the gesture closed a circuit that had sparked too long without ground.
Later, Jerry leaned close and asked her if she could hear the room. She said yes. It sounded like a hangar at night when everything has been put away correctly. Andrew found her by a window and pressed the bracelet with AJ into her palm for a moment, a reminder and a charge. When she looked down, she saw not ornament, but assignment. Near dusk, apprentices lined up for a photograph. Olivia stepped aside so the camera could see their faces, and the picture caught a dozen unguarded grins and one smudge of grease nobody wiped away. Someone taped the seating chart near the tool board, and it looked, wonderfully, like another checklist finally complete. Before leaving, she slipped into a back pew and let stillness inspect her. She replayed the door she had once walked through in rags, the clamp reseated with a crisp click, the red lamp turning green, the baby's thin cry rising through the fuselage, and she let gratitude settle like torque at spec. They were not done with opposition, they were not done with long nights, but today had been a blueprint, a proof that craft and tenderness can share one table and feed a whole room. Olivia rested her head on Jerry's shoulder and watched neon smear across the glass, thinking that nothing in the world is louder than a human heart finally humming in tune.
1 year later, Lagos woke to a clean sunrise that turned the apron to hammered gold, and Olivia stood on the mezzanine cradling her son while the hangar came alive beneath her, a machine of people she had tuned without raising her voice. Apprentices trooped to briefing with checklists tucked in sleeves, leads compared torque maps, dispatch pinned green cards faster than red, and on the whiteboard a simple promise still crowned the day: listen first, sign last. Numbers told the same story: reworks down, on-time releases up, clean audits stacked like polished tools. Yet what steadied her most was the sound, the unshowy hum of practiced craft replacing the brittle clatter of performance. Andrew arrived early, shoulders easier, the bracelet with AJ flashing once as he lifted Jonathan from her arms and kissed the boy's soft crown. Empire builder or not, he had become a man who measured success in breathing rooms and steady cradles. Sam joined with a mug of tar black coffee and a grin that forgave every old doubt. Together they watched Adewale cross the floor with the controlled calm of a pilot greasing a landing. He had changed in the year, less iron, more ballast, and when he shook Olivia's hand, he did it with both of his. "I was wrong," he said, not loudly, not theatrically, only correctly. "You made this place safe to tell the truth." He handed her a battered hardback, the shop procedures he had guarded for years, margins crowded with notes, and asked her to add margins of her own. The saboteur from that long night had been found months ago by the dull precision of logs and locks, not the drama of hunts. Consequences came quiet and permanent, and the lesson hardened into protocol. Clients stayed, rivals visited and went home respectful, and the inspector who once snapped his pen now sent apprentices to study the red-green boards that had tamed ego into learning. At noon, Olivia gave a short talk to a ring of interns who had never known her fence-watching days. She didn't tell them about the rags. She told them about harmonics and heat, about coupled faults that lie by telling half-truths, about discipline as a kind of love you offer the future. She laid a mirror and a flashlight on the table, then the misseated clamp from that first day, and said, "The world will call some things impossible. Listen anyway." After lunch, a medevac call crackled through. Pressurization again, weather brewing, minutes scarce, and the floor moved like a single organism. Outflow valve, gasket, seal, integrity hold, numbers sang. The jet lifted, a thank you caught in the wind like a blessing. Jerry met her in the doorway with a ledger and a sandwich, kissed her knuckles, and led her out to the balcony where the city glittered like circuitry. He had made nonsense expensive at headquarters, priced delays as losses instead of mysteries, turned belief into budgets, without ever needing a headline. They spoke softly about Jonathan's crooked smile and a training fund for girls who fix what people say they can't, and then stood without speaking, breathing the same spare air that had once smelt like survival and now smelt like purpose. Evening tilted, the hangar lights woke, and Olivia walked the floor one last time, touching labels, reading logs, asking apprentices what the aircraft had told them today. The answers were clumsy and proud and correct enough to make the future feel near. At the door, Andrew returned Jonathan heavier with sleep and kissed his daughter-in-law on the forehead the way fathers do when words are too small. Legacy is who carries the light after you. On her desk, amid torque charts and a baby spare sock, she left a note for the morning crew. Begin with beacons, end with questions, never rush the truth. Then she turned out her lamp and stood a moment longer in the hush where work and gratitude overlapped, remembering a red lamp that turned green, a gold gown that fit like permission, a man who said do it, a room that learned to listen. Somewhere a pump ticked, a charger sang, and beyond the doors, the runway held its patient shining line. Second chances are not fireworks, she thought. They are maintenance. Keep listening. Keep teaching.